Gotcha! So this isn't a So You Want a 600 video, it's squid intervention. I know you've been watching 600 squid videos on Instagram and trawling Facebook Marketplace looking for sweet deals on used Gixxer 600s. You don't need to keep disappointing your family like this. It is not too late to turn your life around. Come on, I am, of course, just messing around. What's going on, everyone? It is your boy, your father, the Secretary of Squids, the Calamari-in-Chief, Super Sport Dude, Yammy Noob. We're talking about 600cc sport bikes today. They're the squid missile of choice for many, and the scorn of street bikes for others. Is a 600 class sport bike incredibly impractical, uncomfortable, and oftentimes inconvenient? Absolutely. But there is no denying just how incredibly fun it is to ride a 600 and the intoxicating rush you feel as you rev a screaming four-cylinder out to red line. So we're going to talk about all things 600cc motorcycles today, from their racing origins to how the landscape of middleweight motorcycles is starting to look completely different than it used to. We've got all this and more coming right up. Today's video is sponsored by our good friends over at Rockform. I'll tell you more about them later in the show, but very quickly, I'd like to make a quick shout out about a promotion we have going on at yammynoob.co. Today is the last day to get 10% off all orders over $250 at the store. There is no code required. Your discount will be automatically applied. If you're looking for gear, parts, or tires, head over to yammynoob.co and take advantage of this offer. Plus, your order can get you entered to win our Yamaha R6, one of the best 600 class sport bikes ever made, and since they're no longer in production, an appreciating asset. Who would have thought? So anyway, today's the last day for 10% orders off $250 or more at yammynoob.co. Go and check it out. So what's the deal with 600cc motorcycles? Just like leader bikes, 600 class sport bikes are sold as race replica motorcycles so civilian riders can have the same experience that professional riders have during races. Or at least they can pretend to do so. Much like leader bikes, 600 class sport bikes are faced with many of the same limitations that make them less than ideal for regular street riding, but we'll get to that in a little bit. 600cc sport bikes are raced in certain classes in motorcycle racing, such as the Super Sport class in Moto America or World Supersport, where motorcycles are restricted by engine displacement based on their configuration. In Moto America, bikes racing in the Super Sport class used to be limited to 600cc's for 4-cylinder engines, 675cc's for 3-cylinder engines, and 755cc's for twin-cylinder engines. That's when bikes like the Ducati 749 and the Triumph Daytona 675 were allowed to race alongside conventional 600cc Japanese 4-cylinder bikes. The rules have since changed as of 2022 to allow bikes with larger engine displacements to compete and allowing for higher levels of modifications for 600cc bikes. In the Super Sport class of Moto America, you will find bikes like the Yamaha R6 and the Kawasaki ZX6R racing alongside bikes like the Ducati Panigale V2 and the Suzuki Gixxer 750. The Gixxer 750 was specifically modified to restrict the throttle opening to only 78%, which lends it to make top-end horsepower similar to a 600, with an increase in torque thanks to the extra displacement. Similar concessions are made in World Supersport, the middleweight classification of the World Superbike Championship. In World Supersport, 4-cylinder bikes are limited to 600cc, 3-cylinder bikes are limited to 800cc, and twin-cylinder bikes are limited to 955cc's. This is one of those things that makes the classification of race-oriented sport bikes confusing for non-enthusiasts. Like, why on earth is a 955cc Ducati Panigale racing alongside a 599cc Yamaha R6 in the same quote-unquote middleweight sport bike class? Similar to concessions made in MotoGP or World Superbike, bikes using different engine architectures than your conventional inline 4 cylinders typically make power in different ways and need larger displacements in order to make power comparable to a 4-cylinder bike that can rev all the way to the moon. The bikes currently raced in World Supersport are the Ducati Panigale V2, the Yamaha R6, the Kawasaki ZX6R, the Triumph Daytona 765 RS, kind of the street triple 765 RS is basically the same thing, the Honda CBR 600RR, and the MV Agusta F3 800RR. And if you're wondering which bikes are most competitive currently, it's the Ducati Panigale V2 and the Yamaha R6, although the MV Agusta actually has been pretty competitive lately too. Whether your squid missile is powered by a 4-cylinder, a triple, or a grunty twin, there is no denying you're aiming to reach speeds of 186 miles per hour. And at that speed, you're going to experience some serious wind. And do you think that a cheap phone mount you got off eBay is going to do you any good under those G-forces? I don't think so. Rockform is the only brand we trust to keep our phone safe and secure while squidding. We use Rockform phone mounts on all the bikes in the shop because no matter what bike I'm riding that day, I want to make sure I have a safe and convenient place to keep my phone in case my high-speed run on my H2 ends me leading me astray and I need navigation to get back. Of course, I use a Rockform phone case as well. The rugged cases offer 360 degrees of protection. They're drop tested to military grade standards, and built-in magnets make them easy to attach to various surfaces like your toolbox when you're wrenching on your wretched project bike in the garage, or maybe onto your truck while you're picking up your wretched bike while it's towed on the side of the road. Once you've got your phone case, you can get a mount for your motorcycle, your bicycle, and even your car, and your phone will be protected and secured no matter where you're headed. Rockform has been a long time supporter of Yami Noob, like 3.5 years now, and there really is no other system I'd recommend for motorcyclists. If you head over to rockform.com and use the code YN25, you'll receive 25% off your order. Again, that is rockform.com with code YN25 at checkout for 25% off. Hit that link down below, and thank you so much to Rockform for the support. Back to the video. So what's riding a 600 like? As these bikes exist solely to go around a racetrack as quickly as possible, they are not the most pleasant things to ride on the street. A 600 will have very committed riding positions with your feet high and your back and hands low down in the clip-ons, putting you right in the pocket of the motorcycle. As you can imagine, this riding position is not ideal for the average rider. This is why few motorcycles other than purebred race replicas offer an ergonomics package similar to this, because it's really just not pleasant for normal riding. And the way a 600 makes its power is equally inconvenient. For typical 4-cylinder 600cc sport bikes, they're designed to be revved all the way to redline. And to achieve this, an engine must have a short stroke that allows it to rev incredibly high, sometimes as high as 16,000 RPM. This short stroke high revving engine exists with the sacrifice of immediate low down torque, which is a result of larger displacement and longer stroke. So as a result, most 4-cylinder 600s are pretty gutless down low in the rev range. For instance, a Yamaha R6, which is an esteemed motorcycle on the racetrack, makes just 30 foot-pounds of torque at 8,000 RPM. And it isn't until the bike is revved past 10,000 RPM that the rider really begins to experience the power. And at that point, you're already going faster than you probably need to be going on the street. For instance, an R6 will go 75 miles per hour in first gear. Conversely, the R7, Yamaha's adoption of the parallel twin streetworthy sport bike, makes 40 foot-pounds of torque at just 3,000 RPM. This accessible torque load down in the rev range makes for a much more engaging riding experience around town when you have to deal with stoplights, traffic, and cops with quotas to meet. Despite these limitations, 3 of the big 4 still sell 600 class sport bikes, though their popularity among consumers appears to be waning as so many other options are available now. Yamaha discontinued the R6 in lieu of the R7, but still will sell you the R6 in a track-only variant without a VIN on the frame. Honda and Suzuki still offer their classic 600 class sport bikes, the CBR 600RR and the GSXR 600 respectively. And Kawasaki sells the ZX6R and recently updated it, which is pretty cool. The CBR and Gixxer both make around the same amount of horsepower. The CBR makes about 113 and the Gixxer makes 124. That is a healthy dose of power, but again, they're limited by the engine configurations to not make that power up until the tip top of the rev range. They both have good brakes and suspension components and are designed to be lightweight and agile. The Kawasaki ZX6R is usually regarded as one of the better supersport motorcycles for the street, as its 636cc engine provides more accessible torque thanks to the extra displacement. But I think there are much better options for the squid who wants a race bike for the street. Just like Ducati, Triumph, and MV Agusta have decided, there are advantages to not using a 4-cylinder engine in a race bike, and many of those advantages could be found on the street as well, most notably in regards to how and when a motorcycle makes its power. Ducati has always prioritized V-twin or more recently V4 engines across their racing platforms, and while there is not a singular cause for their legacy of racing success, the wider torque spread of a V-twin engine has been noted as a significant factor. But these bikes, while making power in a different way than a Japanese inline 4, will still be faced with the inconveniences and limitations of a race bike. They're just uncomfortable to ride for a long period of time and are just not designed for use on the street. And to directly remedy the problems attributed to the 600cc race bikes, manufacturers for the last 20 years have been finding ways to redefine the middleweight motorcycle that combines a fun, sporty nature with convenience and comfort. This brings us to the 650. The differences between a 650cc bike and a 600cc bike are another thing that can leave beginner squids scratching their heads. A 650 is bigger. Why is it not faster and more powerful than a 600? 650 bikes were designed to prioritize usable power for city streets in a package that is a balance of both sporty styling and handling and comfortable ergonomics. The easiest bike to show this dichotomy is the Kawasaki Ninja 650. The Ninja 650 uses a 650cc parallel twin engine that makes nearly half the horsepower than a race spec ZX6R, using a 636cc inline 4. But at the expense of this power are more comfortable ergonomics, easy and appropriate broad torque spread, and a significantly cheaper price tag. Since the Ninja 650, there have been other motorcycles that have set out to achieve the goal of a fun but practical sport bike for the streets. Aprilia produces the venerable RS 660, whose engine is essentially the front bank of an RS V4 race bike with a little bit different bore and stroke. The parallel twin with the 270-degree crank makes a good amount of power in all the right places. It is a rich engine with torque still continuing to rev out to a high RPM redline. It sounds great and has a riding style that falls somewhere between a dedicated sport bike and a sport touring bike. It really is the Goldilocks zone for sporty street riding, in my opinion. Yamaha also has the R7 platform, which uses the CP2 engine from the MT-07 with improvements to the chassis and suspension that make it more suitable for aggressive and sporty riding, while still providing the fun factor that the MT-07 is known for. And Honda also makes the CBR 650R, which is really kind of a combination of a bike like the Ninja 650 and a proper sport bike. It still uses an inline 4 engine, but it makes its displacement bump to 649cc and then tuned for the street, making 94 horsepower and 64 foot-pounds of torque, which is a pretty good amount of power for the street. The CBR 650R also has a more comfortable seating position designed for street riding compared to the CBR 600RR. Even Suzuki recognized the shortcomings of a race replica motorcycle and developed the SV 650. The SV isn't a true sport bike, although it has come in some fully fared trim models over the years, but it is approachable, comfortable, practical, and fun. Since the SV 650's inception over 20 years ago, many middleweight bikes have expanded on the style of a torquey, fun, accessible motorcycle. We of course have the MT-07 and then the Honda Hornet 750 and the Gixxis 8S. And while these race bike alternatives aren't outright sport bikes, they're still plenty sporty for the streets. Moto America even recognizes their capability, as bikes like the RS 660, R7, MT-07, and the SV 650 are all raced in Twins Cup. The Triumph Street Triple 765 is a really awesome alternative to a normal 600 as well, making 120 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque. The Street Triple 765 engine has actually been the mandatory platform for all Moto2 race bikes since 2019. So where does that leave us? Are 600s totally pointless on the street? I mean, sort of. For all the reasons we've talked about today, including their uncomfortable riding position and inconvenient power band, not to mention the purchase price, there are just so many better options out there. If you want to get a used 600 for occasional spirited riding or track days, that makes sense. But you probably shouldn't have a 600 as the only motorcycle in your stable. The evolution of the middleweight category has shown us there are plenty of bikes that serve as worthwhile alternatives without making many, if all, sacrifices, except maybe the intoxicating head rush that comes from tripling their horsepower the minute you cross 10,000 RPM. And I gotta say, I'm a bit of an addict myself. I took the R6 out the other day and it's just pretty freaking sweet to wring that thing out. What do you think about 600s? Should every new rider get a ZX6R as an MSF graduation present? If the R6 is discontinued, how will new squids ever be able to reach 186 miles per hour? These are all questions we need answers to. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to subscribe and I will catch you in the next one. Fact: Venus has days longer than its years. It takes about 243 Earth days for Venus to complete one rotation on its axis, while its orbital year is about 225 Earth days, making it the slowest rotating planet in our system. Goodbye. Well, look at you. You've made it to the end of another Yami Noob video. You should consider yourself pretty lucky because I have curated this one right over here for you to continue watching. It's probably just as good as the one you just saw. Unless you hated the one you just saw. I don't know, maybe leave me a comment down below about how much you hated it as well too. Or just keep watching this one. Make sure you keep watching Yami Noob. Don't forget to keep watching Yami Noob. That's the most important thing. Keep watching Yami Noob.